Hi, this is Heather DeRome from heatherderome.com and from the Sonatas and Partitas.com. This video is about the G minor Presto. It's a closing movement of the first sonata, BWV 1001. And I'd like to start off by sort of talking about how it ties into the rest of the sonata, and in a way, how it ties the sonata together. I made a video earlier about the Adagio and discussed how it was in two parts and how the last part mirrored the first part. It was a repeat transposed down to fourth with some elaborations and ornamentations. And this piece also, the Presto, is in two parts, is binary, so it is in two parts. But also, the B part does very closely mirror the A part. The A part starts with a descending G minor arpeggio, and the B part starts with an ascending D major arpeggio. And then there's these parallel seventh chords that just move down by step, and that happens also in the B part. And then we go to a circle of fifths in both parts, and that takes us to what I call the main motive, the main arrival place. In this piece, it just sounds like the party we've all been invited to. It's just a wonderful thing. In the first half, it's in B flat, and in the second half, it's in C minor. And when it happens in C minor, it's a little bit more subdued. It doesn't stand out as much, but it's definitely there, and we'll have a look at that. And then what happens after this part in C minor is we turn around and we head back to G minor, and we arrive back in G minor about 2/3 of the way through the piece. And now that is similar to what Bach did in the Siciliana, where the Siciliana starts in B flat, cadences on G minor, and then it goes back to B flat, and it arrives in B flat about 2/3 of the way through the piece. So both of these pieces have their arrival back home at about this 2/3 mark. And then after that, in the Siciliana, the way I see it is that Bach has taken from the Style Galant, and very unusual writing. And the Presto also is very unusual writing, but for a different reason. The Presto to me seems more like it's archaic. And what Bach has done is he takes a motive and he just repeats it down a step, down a step, down a step until he gets all the way back down to G minor. And he does this a few times, and then he takes it and he moves it up a step, up a step. And he does that a couple of times until he gets to the final cadence. So it gives the Presto a much more innocent kind of air, I find. It allows for the player to be a little bit more, maybe you could say superficial, but on the other hand, I definitely don't suggest ripping through it as fast as you can go. It is written so that you can play it nice and fast, but it's also got these internal cadences, and it's got some wonderful slurrings and bowings in the violin music. So have a close look at those so that you can, even when you're playing it fast, that you've got some really nice phrasing. So let's have a look. Descending arpeggio, dominant. Okay, now here we are. So we got the parallel seventh chords, taking us to the circle of fifths. Now, if you're a guitarist and you're playing the arrangement that Frank Koonce and I made, if you find these bar chords difficult, my one suggestion and recommendation is to just give them an honest try. Every single one of my students who learned this piece complained at first about the bar chords, and I actually found them difficult too. And I basically told my students, look, if I can do it, you can do it. Just practice it every day until your hand gets a little bit tired, and then leave it till the next day. And really, within 2 or 3 weeks, you'll be able to do it easily. Now, something that can help is, see, there's a lot of 5-string bars, followed by 4-string bars. So when you're playing the note with your pinky, you can lift off the bar and back it up 1 string. And it gives your hand just a little time to relax. So there's the end of our circle of fifths. And here, a right-hand fingering that I find works well is you can go M, P, I, M, P, I, M, P, I, M, P, I. And then you're ending with I on the top string. And when you're going back to M on the 4th string, as you're playing I, put your thumb on the 5th string and then just bring your finger down to the 4th string, and you probably won't overshoot or undershoot that string. There we go. if you've watched the introduction video, which hopefully you have, there's a video that talks about issues that come up in practically all of these pieces. So what we've done here is everything that we've done so far has taken us to this B flat place. And what happens when we get to this place where we're going all the time is that Bach stops. So when we were going up here, we had a new chord at 2 per bar, or 1 in every bar, 2 per bar. And here now we're on B flat. We're staying on B flat. Still on B flat. There, B flat. And now we're going to leave. And now everything that's happening after this is to take us to the final cadence. And if you think of a composer's little bag of tricks, if you like, the simplest one, the most basic one, is like music going up or music going down. And so what Bach does, he uses that in this piece. Like we're going up and up and up till we get to B flat. And now we're literally going to wind down, going down, 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 and still going down. There. And now we're on the dominant. And so now we're going to go back up to the cadence. And we are modulating to D minor, not to D major. I just have to impress that upon you. We're in D minor, still D minor, B flat, still D minor, still D minor. And now we could have done that. Bach could have done that, except that they never did that in the Baroque period. They always cadenced on a picardy third if they were in a minor piece. So that's what every single binary movement in a minor key in the sonatas and partitas does. It modulates to the minor dominant and cadences with a picardy third. Okay. Ascending arpeggio. Now we're going to go back to G minor. There we are. Okay, now here we go with the parallel 7th chords again. And a circle of fifths again. And then here, this is the counterpart to this. Can you see how the bass goes augmented second? And the melody goes, and before the bass went, and the top would. So everything that's happening here, it's taking us to this, and then we're going to cadence. There, cadence on C, and now leave C, pass through F. We are on the dominant of G minor, and now we're going to start moving up by steps. So now we have D, E, F, G, A, and we're dominant, and we arrive at G minor. There's our arrival home with a beautiful motive. Now we're back to the dominant of G again. Back to G, and a new motive. So now we have F in the bass, E, D, C, and now back to G minor again in first inversion. And now we've got a new motive. This one's got a chromatic bass line woven into it. So F, E, D, E flat, D, C, that's a dominant of G. A new motive. C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Now one last time. C, D, So if you read the notes in our edition of the Sonatas and Partitas, Frank Koonce and I wrote that this Presto has a more archaic feel, and that was what we meant. Now, we are trained to look at music in terms of functional harmony. You have a 1 chord, a 4 chord, and a 5 chord, and 4 goes to 5, and 5 goes to 1, and that is how Bach wrote, and it's very enlightening to look at his music in those terms. And I did look at all the movements of the sonatas and partitas in those terms and figured out what all the chords were. But when I tried to do that with this Presto, I was just stumped. And it's just not how he wrote that piece. Now, this functional harmony, that was discovered by Rameau. It was discovered, and he wrote a treatise about it after Bach wrote the Sonatas and Partitas, and apparently Bach disagreed with it. Bach said that he wrote figured bass, he had a bass line and wrote intervals above the bass. He was trained in the rule of the octave, and he was trained to use partimenti and little figures that he would link together just like he did in this piece. And he would in most of his music, and in the High Baroque, all composers did. They linked these figures together to make functional harmony. But earlier on, they didn't link them together to make functional harmony. They linked them together differently. And that is why Renaissance music tends to sound a little bit more meandery. But it was, Bach did compose all his music using these little modules, building blocks. And the idea of composing as like inventing from scratch, that was a concept that came up in the Romantic era. It's not how Baroque composers wrote. So I want to read a little thing here. It's written by Mattheson, who was a contemporary of Bach. He was a friend of Bach's, actually. So he wrote, "Many might think then that we have used figures and such like for so long now without knowing their names or meanings," so long, several hundred years, "that we can be content to put rhetoric on the back burner." I love how he mentions rhetoric. Everything you read by contemporary sources, like written back then, they always talk about affect and rhetoric. Affect is stirring the human emotions, and rhetoric is how music speaks to you. And that was their goal in music. So these seem even more absurd than the bourgeois gentilhomme of Molière, who had no idea it was a pronoun when he said I, you, or he, or that it was an imperative when he said to his servant, "Come here." So all of these little modules that Bach used in the Presto, they all actually had names. So my book here has a list of several of them. I mean, there were hundreds and hundreds, and they're not all listed there. But this one, that one is listed there. It's called Accentus. So that was nice to find one of them in there. Anyway, I hope you've found this helpful. As always, let us know what you think at sonatasandpartitas.com.